Off the mat and into recovery, how yoga supports sobriety. In this episode of the Talking Addiction Recovery podcast, we sit down with Brian Hyman, author of Recovery with Yoga, Supportive Practices for Transcending Addiction, to explore how yoga became a transformative part of his recovery journey. Brian shares his path from alcohol addiction to sobriety and how yoga offered far more than physical movement. Through breath, mindfulness, and spiritual exploration, yoga became a powerful tool for emotional regulation, self-awareness, and resilience. He discusses the challenges of introducing yoga into treatment settings, the importance of integrating practice into daily life beyond the mat, and how stillness can become a strength rather than something to avoid. This conversation explores how yoga can help individuals in recovery manage cravings, sit with difficult emotions, and cultivate presence. Brian reminds us that recovery is not about perfection, it's about perseverance, curiosity, and connection.
This is Talking Addiction and Recovery, the podcast talking, you guessed it, all about addiction and recovery. Join your host, licensed professional counselor Andrew J. Schreier, as he and his guests break down recovery topics with raw honesty, delving into niche conversations around the topics of substance abuse, mental health, and gambling. We intend to meet individuals where they are on their own personal journey of recovery, with dignity, respect, and compassion. We'll do more than talk addiction and recovery. We'll explore it. We're glad you've joined us. Here with today's episode, your host, Andrew Schreier.
Brian Hyman, RYT, is a dedicated yoga and meditation teacher, speaker, artist, and advocate in the field of addiction recovery, blending mindfulness, movement, and spiritual practice to support lasting transformation. He has been working at Cliffside, Malibu since 2012, where he has helped thousands of individuals reconnect with themselves and build meaningful, sustainable lives in recovery. Brian is the award-winning author of Recovery with Yoga, Supportive Practices for Transcending Addiction, a book that integrates physical practice, breathwork, yogic philosophy, spiritual principles, and mindfulness teachings as powerful tools for healing. His work extends to Insight Timer, where he shares guided practices that have supported more than 1 million people on their journey toward clarity and inner peace. Brian has been interviewed by The Healing Place, Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Bold Journey, Healing the Divide, and Canvas Rebel. His writing has appeared in Newsweek, Yoga Magazine, Well Plus Good, Yoga Journal, Mantra Wellness, and Whole Lifetimes. The solo exhibition of paintings, The Art of Recovery, premiered at the Gardens of the World Gallery near Los Angeles in 2025. Brian is a member of Yoga Alliance, International Association of Yoga Therapists, and SAG-AFTRA. He is a legacy ambassador for Lululemon and former yoga ambassador for Manduka, Yoga Earth, and Yoga Aid. Brian has been sober since 2009, and he brings authenticity, compassion, and lived experience to all of his creative endeavors, including his Insight Timer recovery-themed audio courses, Recovery, Principles for a Purpose Life, Emotional Sobriety, Finding Freedom, Harmony, and Peace in Recovery, and Sobriety Q&A, Insights for Addiction Recovery. His accessible approach to recovery is universal and rooted in the belief that lasting recovery involves awakening the mind, caring for the body, and nurturing the spirit, creating a path not just to sobriety, but to a deeply fulfilling and meaningful life. You can learn more about Brian and ways to connect with him in the podcast notes. On this episode of Talking Addiction and Recovery podcast, we want to welcome Brian Hyman. Thanks for joining.
Oh, thanks for having me, Andrew.
You are the author of Recovery with Yoga, Supportive Practices for Transcending Addiction. I'm really looking forward to having conversation around the book, but also recovery and yoga and addiction in general. Before we do, can you give the audience a little bit of a background about yourself?
Sure. It's interesting. I've been sober 16 years now. So over the years, it's not that my story changes or the details change, but I could ask, do you want the short version or the mid-sized version or the long version, depending on which details I would like to share. But essentially, I started drinking. Alcohol was my main thing as an addiction. I started drinking in my teens, and it just got progressively worse into my 20s and then into my early 30s. I got sober at 34, sparing you some of the details, through the drinking, it was just I lost my self-esteem, a sense of self-worth, self-confidence, lost my purpose in life. Didn't really have much of a drive to pursue anything or to move toward anything. I just felt stuck. And the catalyst, what changed for me was my mother passed away. She got sick, and it really made me examine life, specifically my life, mortality, the miracle of life, the fragility of life. And basically, what we have here is a limited amount of time. And I had that moment where a lot of people in recovery have faced a moment like that where it's just time to get busy living and do something to get to the next level, to get to the next phase, to get onto the path of healing or transformation or recovery. And so I started going to 12-step meetings. I did what was suggested, and my life changed. And within my first year of recovery, I really found yoga to be a very safe place, an incredible, not just a practice, not just a class at the gym, but a life philosophy, a way of being. It was more than just poses. It was well beyond that. It helped me quiet my mind. It got me in touch with my spirit. And so I decided that teaching yoga and then combining what I'd learned through recovery with yoga as it felt like my next new thing, the next right thing. My purpose was to help bring what I had found in yoga to other people who may not know about it or can't get to it. And so I decided to teach yoga, specifically to people in recovery. And over the last 15 or so years now, I've been doing that. I've been writing articles about yoga and recovery, creating courses. I wrote a book, and along the way, I became a father. Life gets really incredible. All these years later, I love my life. It's a beautiful thing to get the chance to change like I did. Um, so I am grateful to be here, and I'm grateful to share that recovery is alive and well. It works, and yeah, would love to talk more about it.
Yeah, I was really excited to get the book because I'll share with you in my experience as a counselor working in all types of treatment programs, group home, halfway house. You see this a lot when people live at treatment because all of a sudden there's a lot to do with, well, what do they do between counseling sessions and chores? So when I first started, there was really no talk of like yoga and recovery or yoga being a part of treatment. That was really like nothing that was really talked about, nothing that was really heard of. Then all of a sudden, I would say maybe 10 years in, you started to hear more about yoga, mindfulness. And even though these were not new, right? This has been around for quite a while. We start seeing more, okay, this could be really good for addiction, mental health. This could be good for treatment. I started seeing it then being added into like schedules. So like, okay, people wake up, they do their breakfast, maybe they do a morning meditation, and then there's 30 minutes for maybe yoga before doing counseling. So I'm starting to see more of it. But after I read your book, and as you started talking about it, I'm seeing like I think we're still missing a lot that could be connected with it. When you're talking about adding the philosophical pieces to it, when you write a book about it, like this wasn't reading about poses, this wasn't reading about what to do for like 10 minutes. There were some things in there, but this is I almost thought of this as like a treasure discovered that is still very much lacking in the sense of treatment, recovery, and I'm wondering, where are you with all that? Am I sensing something there? Am I way off? But this to me opened my eyes up to a whole area of like we're still not getting it when it comes to yoga. We're still not getting it when it comes to how this could be beneficial for addiction and mental health and that. So, what are your thoughts with everything I just threw out there to you?
Well, first of all, thank you for reading the book, and thank you for your kind words about what's in the book. It's probably one of the best compliments is someone will say, I thought this was going to be about yoga. And the misconception most of us have is yoga is a class at the gym. It's physical postures, it's movements, it's what we see in magazines and movies and TV shows. And when I got into yoga, I knew it was a physical class. I knew it was physical, but what I was getting personally from it was so much more. And I'm not unique or special. I was just in a place in my life where I was hungry for what was being offered, which was the philosophy, the spirituality, the emotional regulation, nervous system regulation. Those are the types of things that were happening for me while doing those physical postures. And I realized, wow, there's, like you said, there's a treasure here. There's so much untapped potential for this to be more than just a class at the gym. How come nobody's talking about this? It was hard because when I started doing the work that I'm doing, as you mentioned, there weren't many people doing this type of work. There were maybe two or three teachers that I knew of personally that were starting to combine yoga and recovery in a way that went well beyond the poses, off the mat, into the world and how we live life. And what it came down to for me was therapy was great. 12-step meetings were great. A lot of those things helped me with my mind. But something magical started to happen when I would be physically in a pose and there's nowhere to go. You're in the pose, you're holding the pose. And that's when I would have the opportunity to take the inward journey. I would start to notice that holding a pose, a certain pose, would make me angry. What I was taught to do is to just identify the anger, be with the anger, breathe through the anger, and just like a cloud in the sky, it just passes by. So I started to learn, oh my God, now I know what to do with my anger out in the real world. The next time it comes up, I'll just recognize it. I'll identify it, I'll breathe with it, and it should pass by. And sure enough, that's what was happening was this became a way of being, not a thing of doing. It wasn't about doing poses or doing yoga. It was a philosophy. It was a way of life. It was spirituality. It was, like I mentioned, emotional sobriety. It's something that I took from my practice as well. And what I hope is most beneficial for people who pick up this book is that they do find that it's yoga is more than poses. I laugh because, as I mentioned, it's if I was going to write a book about it's been done so many times, and a lot of teachers are really good at teaching poses. I learned how to teach poses. I learned a lot about anatomy and physiology, and I don't think that's what I'm here to do personally. I'll take that, and then I've added the extra piece that I feel uniquely qualified to share, which is yoga saved my life. It really was a huge part of my recovery. My mat became a magic carpet because the stuff that I couldn't tell my therapist, I wasn't ready to tell my therapist, the stuff I couldn't articulate yet about what had happened in my life and where I was, my sadness, loss, grief, shame, depression, those are the things I processed on my mat, and it's indescribable. So that's hopefully what I was able to cover in this book. And to make it accessible to everyone, I just stuck to the principles. It's just 30 principles that are universal, timeless, fundamental. Doesn't matter if you're religious or spiritual, if you're atheist, if you're agnostic. For example, chapter one is honesty. We can all relate to honesty. And the idea is to find honesty in your life and your practice with where you are in your recovery. And the good thing is, you don't need to be in recovery, recovering, recovered, sober. You could be a therapist, a family member. Honesty is honesty. It relates to every human being. So I felt that just sticking to the principles, these tenets, if you will, these ideals would be most beneficial because they'd be most accessible across the board. Um, no, but thank you. I like when people say, "Well, I didn't know this actually had nothing to do with yoga."
Yeah. And I love the way you phrase it. I think it's going to be, I wrote this down, which I think I'm 99% sure this is going to be a title of this episode, is when you said off the mat and into the world. I thought that was so great because how often do we talk about things in like group group therapy sessions, individual sessions? I always say I worry the least amount when I'm in session with someone because they're there, they're with me. But it's when they leave treatment, it's when they leave that safe space and then they go and deal with everything else going on in life. And to me, it's exactly that with the things with, yeah, you went to a yoga class and you had the poses, you got something out of it, but then also like it's not just about packing up and now it's done, but it's also what do you do when you take it with that? Which I think that's what gets missed a lot is now how do you take that and bring it into parts of your life versus okay, I got my watch set 30 minutes, I got my workout in, so now that's good. This is more to that. So I love that phrase, off the mat and into the world is so representative of really what you're talking about and what this book represents.
Yeah, and I mention that often. I've been working at the same treatment center for about 14 years now. And I tell the patients that if all we're doing is yoga and if all you're going to do is leave the poses here in the room or on the mat and not do anything with them outside, out in the real world, what we're doing is almost performing. They're circus tricks. They're almost like athletic feats, like we're trying to achieve something. And it's a shame because there's so much there to not do something with it, to implement these things into all of our affairs out in the world. Um, I don't think that's the point of yoga. It's not, I don't think it's something we're just supposed to do, like you said, for 30 minutes because it's on the schedule and then go right back to the so-called real world. Because if we can't figure out what was useful on the mat and take it with us, I'm not sure what the point is in practicing then, except we're just going to stretch and get flexible and find balance, maybe get stronger. I don't think those things are going to save someone, especially in active addiction mode. If somebody, can't figure out how to regulate themselves or how to find peace or calm, they're in big trouble. So there's a lot available on the mat, and it's a real shame if we don't take those things and do something with them, and additionally share them with other people. So if you find peace on your mat, get out into the world and go be peace. If you find self-love, if you find compassion for yourself or forgiveness holding a pose, then get out into the world and be that for somebody else. Be that safe space because you know what it is to have a safe space. A yoga mat, your practice, the studio, the teacher, the other practitioners. Now go offer that to others. That's the added benefit that we don't even see coming is as a yogi, you go out into the world and you're an ambassador for peace or calm or balance.
When you mentioned doing this at a treatment program, you mentioned getting some classes. Was this a hard sell? I mean, was this tough to, I mean, I've written treatment programs to where we have to write down like the evidence base behind it, how this directly works for addressing this issue. Like I've been a part of some pretty intense programs where we just couldn't say we're gonna do like we had to really represent and really advocate for like what our treatment was going to look like. So I'm curious, did you meet any reluctance, hesitation from people, anyone who was like, well, yoga's great, but really we got to do the things that are going to treat it, where they look at, some of the evidence-based like curriculum stuff of like what we know of like CBT, MI, that type of like my world therapy. So I'm curious, what was that like for you early on when trying to get this more into, no, no, this isn't to to fit the extra schedule in for this time slot that we've got no group going on or nothing, but this is part of the component. What was that like for you, especially early on?
I was fortunate because I never had to compromise or impress anybody. I didn't have to come up with anything special. All I was able to do and got to do was exactly what I had been doing anyway. So briefly, when I wanted to teach yoga to people in recovery, I emailed every treatment center and sober living home in my area in California at the time, and nobody replied, nobody responded. And I got a little bit, I didn't feel rejected, but I just felt sort of deflated. I was thinking, oh man, I really wanted to bring this to people in treatment. And, but I didn't let that stop me. The next thought was, I'll find a space. And so I found a church space in West Hollywood that was friendly to people in recovery. They had a lot of 12-step meetings there. So I called the pastor one day and asked him if we could do a yoga class for people in recovery. And he said yes. So I started teaching this class for free, donation-based class. We could cover the rent once a week. I did that for about Well, in total, it was almost 2 years I did that, but I was doing it for a while, every week, showing up, teaching this class. And I didn't know at the time, but looking back, I realized what I had done was I was learning how to talk with people in recovery. I was finding my voice as a teacher. I was learning which sequences, which types of comments, which Sanskrit words, which philosophy terms, which the psychology, what was working and what wasn't. I could see immediately in real time when people were getting things and when they weren't. So I was really over that time period teaching every week was starting to tailor or curate a sort of program, if you will, that was really working for a lot of people. And a woman came one night about a year into this. So I was doing this for a year and really kind of really going at it and figuring out what was going on. So a woman came and she took the class and she said afterwards, "You have to teach this where I work." I asked her where she worked. She told me the name of the treatment center. And I said, "Oh, I've emailed them so many times. They won't get back to me." She said, "I work there. Use my name." And so the next day I emailed them and they had me come in and do a demo class. They said, "Come teach. We'll see what you got." And they had me do a live class with patients who were there. And there was a therapist who was the program director at the time. He was sitting in the back, just making sure, just checking. After 2 or 3 minutes, he got up and left. I just started. I don't know. I didn't know what to think, so I just kept teaching. When I finished, he found me. He said, "Come talk with me." And he said, "We were going to have you come in twice a week. Can you come in 3 times a week?" I said,
Wow.
"Sure." And then I said, "Can I ask you, why did you leave?" He goes, I could see you know what you're doing. I didn't need to stay for that."
Wow.
And I just been doing the same thing ever since for the last 15 years. And I think it comes from my personal recovery. It comes from figuring out with my own body, my mind, my heart, my spirit, my past, and my practice, what has worked for me. And I've seen it now. I have a pretty good idea of what's worked. I've worked with tens of thousands of patients over the last 15 years. I don't know how many classes I've taught. So I've seen what seems to work well with most people is we target areas of the body where the emotions and feelings are stored. So specifically, I'll give you a little bit of an idea of what I work with is across the heart space, we store sadness, loss, grief, depression. So we do specific postures and movements to open up the heart, the chest. In the lower back, we store anger, resentments, grudges, grievances, the things we can't forgive. So we do things, poses, movements to open the lower back. In the hips, and this is all according to the yoga tradition, we store things like abandonment, rejection, betrayal, sexual trauma. So we do a lot of hip openers to open that area. On the shoulders, most of us know the weight of the world, all of our burdens and responsibilities. So we do a lot of things to open up the shoulders. So we specifically target these areas in a flow-like sequence that is accessible to everybody. And I've always been very open from the very beginning. I let students or patients know this is your practice. You can modify anything you want. You can alter anything. You can change it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. If you can't do it, don't do it. You don't have to impress me. They're not my poses. I didn't create them. And the whole point of this is for you to find a way to find your own practice. Because I promise you, if you can find your own practice on this mat, you can find your own recovery out in the world. It's the same idea as you have to figure out what works for you and do it. And the same thing with recovery.
That's amazing. Kudos to the person that gave you that that chance and said, "Hey, come to my treatment program. Hey, I emailed you a couple times, and you know they." I was just talking to someone on another podcast episode about how sometimes we need people to give us those chances, those opportunities, and when we do, it's amazing at what it can do to then to keep going forward and helping others. So it was amazing that even that person that never, and it wasn't her that didn't respond to you, but just the fact that, they never responded back to you and then they had you come there and they had you not just do it twice, but asked you to come another time. So that's pretty incredible. Those are great stories to hear. I'm curious about, I think about yoga can be great for, I think for everyone, right? So sometimes I think of it like I do ultra running, ultra trail running. So I think yoga is really good. And then I do a specific yoga designed for running. And the whole time the instructor is talking about like how this is focused on running, how this is about certain things when you're running. So to me, like I'm doing this specifically to address it, not just that it's good for me. So now I want to tie this into addiction. So are there things that we would look at, and I know your book is full of them, that when we look at yoga, why it is so helpful for transcending addiction? Like, what is it about that that really helps for something that a lot of people are struggling with? A lot of people don't know what to do with it. There's a significant, sometimes distress to deal with addiction because of how it can become. So what is it that you've learned or what is it that you know that really makes yoga help transcend addiction?
Without a yoga practice, I'm thinking back to my days when I was drinking. I drank to escape the present moment. I didn't have the words for that back then. I didn't know why I was doing it, but with reflection all these years later, I wanted to shift my consciousness. I didn't want to be me. I didn't want to be in the present moment. I didn't want to think and I didn't want to feel. So I drank because it was numbing and it was a great escape. And that was my plan. If I had a plan at all, was to continue to do that so I didn't have to be me. Because if I was alone with myself, then I'm alone with my thoughts, and then I'm going to think about I'm a loser, I suck, life sucks, you suck, I need a job, I need money. I would go into all the fears and the resentments. And what yoga teaches is the exact opposite: how to be with yourself, how to stay present, how to identify, name, and most importantly, befriend these things. So if self-hatred comes up, you say, "Hello, self-hatred, my old friend. Sit with me, breathe with me." So the techniques, the things that we learn, the practices, the breathing, for example, breathing, learning how to just breathe. We're going to do it anyway. As a human being, you're going to breathe anyway. There's something really magical that happens when we bring conscious awareness to just one breath, just inhaling, just knowing that you're inhaling as you're inhaling, and as you exhale, knowing that you're exhaling. In that 2 or 3 seconds, if your mind is connected to the inhale and the exhale, your mind is not able to go jump into the past or future. You're keeping yourself present. If you string together enough of those moments where you're conscious, you're aware, you're breathing, in the yoga tradition, it's called pranayama. Prana is life force. Pranayama is the extension of the life force. You're literally going to extend your life force. This is your vitality. You're going to calm your nervous system. You're going to relax your body physically, your mind, mentally, your heart. Um, what yoga offers is a chance to physically repair the body. It's interesting. I say it sometimes this way to some patients. I said, addiction or alcoholism has this three-prong attack. Addiction wants to destroy your mind, it wants to destroy your body, and it wants to destroy your spirit. The good news is yoga has a three-pronged defense system. Yoga will strengthen and quiet your mind. It'll strengthen and detox and purify your body, and it'll strengthen your connection to your spirit. What a great remedy. If
Yeah.
alcohol wants to knock out this system of mind, body, spirit, yoga says, I got you covered. I'm going to repair that and I'm going to fortify it better than ever. So there's so many tools within the yoga uh, uh, practice. And practice is even uh, it's a subtle way of letting people know that it's something. Like we talked about, I think it's a lot more than just a practice. I wouldn't say that yoga. I'll add this piece just so, I went through the 12 steps. That's fundamental for me personally as a foundation of my recovery. I'm not sure if just yoga would have healed me or helped me or cured me or kept me alive. The 12 steps, I had a therapist I talked to every week. I did a lot of other things. I read a lot of books. The yoga piece is supplemental. It's complementary to these other healing modalities and therapies. And then at some point, all the lines for me personally, all the categories and all that, they all started to blend into each other. So today, I don't put on my yoga hat and I'm a yogi, and then I take off that hat and then put on my addiction recovery employee hat and put that on. And then I wrote a book, so then I'll put on my author hat. I can't be three different people. And then so at some point, yoga becomes the thread. It becomes the way of being that allows me to be recovered, that allows me to work in treatment. It allows me to be a father. It allows me to be a good friend, a sponsor, a sponsee. Yoga means union. For those who aren't aware, in Sanskrit, the literal definition, it breaks down to union. It's to bring things together, to come into a state of wholeness or completeness, and that's what life can look like with this extra piece added to recovery. Recovery's fine. The 12 steps are fine. There's a lot of things that will get you sober and keep you sober. But the people I've seen who actually add in yoga, in addition to meditation, mindfulness practices, similar disciplines, it's like this upgrade. It takes you to a whole other place. And it's not that you're going to be superior or you're more enhanced or you're more special. Um, but if you can do that, why wouldn't you try it? Just, add something, enhance it, upgrade it, transcend.
There's two stories I want to share with you, and then with it, it will have a question. And this is just, if you bear with me, there's a point I'm going to connect with these. So I mentioned I did ultra trail running, and years ago I had a Apple Nano, the tiny ones, and it died, it broke, and then all of a sudden they don't make them anymore, and I hate running with my phone because it's so big. So I gave up running with music, and I'll do, like a 50K ultra marathon, no music, so nothing, right? Second story is a boss of mine years ago told me about how she went on a mindfulness retreat that was a couple days long, but it was pretty, I don't know if I want to say intense, but like you couldn't have your phone. You weren't allowed to like really do any intense workout. You could like walk, you could do some yoga type things. And she told me after that experience, like she never really understood cravings until then because she was going through what it was like to crave to use a phone, to crave to like do something. Here's where I want to tie this all into it. When we think of doing some things like yoga, is part of a fear for people. I think it's a couple of things. One, I think it's easy to think of like I'm not good at it or I'm not fit for it. I think sometimes it's easy to say like why a program wouldn't want to adopt a yoga because, we got to do all this treatment, all this type of stuff that we already talked about, right? Is there any part that people are afraid to sit with themselves in silence? That when there isn't noise, there isn't distraction, when there isn't all this stuff going on, that sitting with just my thoughts is a scary place. And sometimes that can be the challenge of doing some things like this is even though you're not alone, you can be with people doing it, but part of it is you're going to be spending a lot more time with yourself up in here. And for a lot of people I know in addiction work and mental health stuff, but I just think people in general, that's that's a scary place to be. So I took those two things and brought them to this question I've been really wondering and wanting to ask is, do you think part of why people don't just jump to this or want to do it is that they don't want to say I'm afraid or I'm scared to just sit with my thoughts? To me, that's too much.
Yeah, that happens often. More so in meditation. I also lead meditation groups, and a lot of patients will avoid the meditation group because it's almost inherent to the description or idea of meditation is you're going to sit with yourself. So most people who don't want to do that will not go do that. Yoga is a little more confusing because I don't think a lot of people are aware of just how close you will come to your real self in your practice. But I agree that many people do know that doing yoga, I share and joke sometimes that the yoga mat is only big enough for just you in the present moment. It's just a rectangle. There's no room to bring anything with you. You can't bring anything, any distractions, no iPod, no phone. All that's meant to fit on that mat is just you in the here and now. And that can be a nightmare for a lot of people. That's why we drink and use and avoid and we watch Netflix and I like Netflix, but we can binge watch, we can do gambling, we can do pornography, we can do masturbation, we can do shopping. We have so many outlets and things, we relationships and even healthy things. Maybe we're doing too much of the gardening or the artwork or whatever it might be. At some point, we have to figure out why we can't sit with ourselves. What's wrong with just sitting and just being? And that's why a lot of people that I've met over the last almost 2 decades now, we choose to drink and use instead because the pain is it's too overwhelming to just sit with ourselves. And that's why it's if the pain is so overwhelming, imagine what the reward is when you overcome that. It's incredible to get past that point. But I agree, a lot of people, myself included, the first time I tried to meditate or listen, or I couldn't sit with myself for more than a minute. I set the timer and I couldn't sit with my eyes closed for more than a minute before I opened my eyes to see how much time had passed. It had only been about 20 or 30 seconds, and it blew my mind. At 35 years old, I could not sit with myself for 30 seconds. Do I hate myself that much? Am I that uncomfortable in my own skin? What was the story? What was going on there? And what it came down to for me, and Thich Nhat Hanh really talked about this a lot, is that we are running. We're always running. We're always consuming. We're always doing anything we can, basically, to avoid being with ourselves in the present moment. And yoga is an invitation to come home to yourself in the here and now. The very first teaching in the Yoga Sutra says yoga happens now. So from the very beginning, you're taught that you're going to have to get into the present moment with yourself. There's nowhere else to go. And it's such good news because there's nowhere else that we should be, and there's no other time that exists. We all know what it's like to dig around into the past and live there mentally with regret and shame and remorse. We all know what it's like to jump into the future with all that apprehension and fear and uncertainty. Not a good place to live there either. So yoga is it's a free ticket. It's to come home to the present moment and start to learn to get comfortable with yourself. And then it becomes a joy. I really enjoy practicing now. Early on, I did it for the physical benefits. I thought it was just a cool thing to do to stretch, and I had no idea these other things were there. Like it was going to give me the ability to just be with myself, whether I was rich or poor, whether I was sick or healthy, whatever the circumstances are. It's contentment. And there's so many tools that help us do that. So the simplicity of it, I already mentioned the breath. Another one is to focus on one spot. So you'll do a balance pose in yoga, which means to balance, you're going to have to stay still. You're going to have to stay in one spot or you can't find balance. And what's suggested is you find what's called a drishti, a focal point. So what you're taught to do is to find balance, you just pick one spot and you just keep looking at that one spot. And again, this is one of those things where if you can find this in the pose, you just learn concentration. You just learn how to stay present. You just learn how to focus. You can take that off the mat into the world, and you will be able to just be with yourself, and you'll be able to just be with whoever's in front of you because you'll be learn how to concentrate. You'll learn how to use them as your focal point. There's no more scatterbrain. There's no more running away. There's no more avoiding anything.
I think I would like how you brought up the stillness part and distractions, and we're always busy because I think treatment can sometimes be a product of that. People talk about how challenging it is or how much of a trigger boredom is. And then right away, what do we try to do? Well, keep your schedule busy, like stay busy, keep doing things. I'm thinking back now that we don't always talk about let's try and sit through that, or let's probably try to process that. Normally, it's you know we hear things like idle time is the devil's playground, where all of a sudden like be afraid of boredom, be afraid of stillness, be afraid of nothing going on, because then that's when you struggle, and that's when then you go back to using like that. You hear that so often, and yet it seems like part of this is stillness isn't doing nothing, and doing some of this isn't just buying your time, but it's actually getting more comfortable and getting to know you just like in the moment without needing all this other stuff, without needing every type of distraction that's happening, or needing all the stuff, that there's part of it is kind of like a reconnecting with you, and just being able to sit with that. I think we've accidentally become a product of, you gotta keep busy, you gotta keep your schedule full, you gotta keep going, 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 because boredom and silence and stillness is scary. And it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I have a friend, he says he's been in recovery for many decades, and he reminds me, our culture teaches us don't just sit there, do something, as if just sitting around doing nothing is lazy, or we should be busy, we should be active, and he flips it around and he says instead of don't just sit there, do something, he says don't just do something, sit there. And it really forces us to see what happens when the noise, the outer noise, the TV, the radio, the whatever it might be, whatever we're doing ceases when we finally stop. Yoga is a cessation of thought. It's a cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. That's the second teaching after we're taught yoga is happening now. The second of the sutras is yoga is a quieting of the mind. Um, it's powerful when when we are able to start to, and I'm very careful with, I would never tell someone, sit with yourself. So the language is important too. So let's begin. Let's start to see what it's like to sit with ourselves. Let's begin to work on being still, because it may take some of us years. It may take a few weeks, a few months, a few decades to finally get to a place where it's the only place you want to be. These days, I joke that if I could just be years ago, I wanted to just run off into the mountains somewhere, get a cabin, and just kind of live that fantasy in my 20s. And now I actually want to do it again, but for a different reason. You know, in my 20s, it was I wanted to run away from the world. Now life is so busy and full that it would just be such a it wouldn't it would just be so nice to just get a break, just take a moment to just be sitting, and doing nothing. Now I would love to sit and do nothing. But I'm in the phase of my life where the universe or God has a different plan for me. He wants me to he wants me to keep busy and get out there, help some other people, and so that's where I'm at now. But I look forward to coming back to that place where I can kind of sit around and do nothing. I do it throughout the day, though. So for me personally, I meditate throughout the day a few times. I sit with myself, and I really enjoy that 5 or 10 minutes of just sitting. And for anyone new to meditation or anyone who hasn't practiced in a while, I just focus on my breath. It's already there anyway, like we talked about earlier. And I'm already sitting there anyway, so I might as well focus on what's there. And I promise you, every time I focus on my breath, I don't have the time or mental bandwidth to focus on anything else. You give 100% of your attention to your breath, and you notice what happens after a while. Your your mind starts to work for you instead of the other way around. We've probably all heard that at some point. The mind's a terrible a master, but a wonderful servant. Most of the time, the mind is telling us where to go and what to do. If we can turn the tables and we actually tell the mind, no, you sit there. We're going to meditate. You stop with your nonsense. You're going to focus on the breath. Stop focusing on the future. And so the mind becomes a really good servant when we learn how to train it. That's one thing yoga is known as well as a training of the mind. So again, nothing to do with the body or the poses.
One last question before we wrap up. I mentioned at the beginning, when I first got your book and read it, I was like, this is not what I expected. I learned a lot more than I thought, like just these treasures that were now discovered, that we're really not using, not thinking about, not applying. What would you say to people who are, maybe, yeah, yoga's great, but we got to focus on all this other stuff, or someone who is maybe using yoga, maybe thinking about the poses are great, it helps me with this. What would you say to people who they haven't yet discovered what yoga can really do for transcending addiction? What would you either say to them, or what's something you'd recommend as like a next step for just getting closer to more of the benefits that we continue to miss out on something that's been around for so long.
I would probably invite people to be curious, to be open-minded, to look deeply, and to not brush away thoughts or memories or ideas or intuitive sort of inner whispers that come up as you practice. That's what happened for me, and that's how I started to sort of tiptoe my way into this other way of thinking about yoga. Because as I mentioned, when I started practicing, it was just a physical practice. I thought it was something I could do when I didn't want to work out with weights or machines at the gym. I would do the yoga class, and I could still consider it a workout without actually having to work out. I thought it was this lesser way of working out. And then what happened was in my early sobriety, I was hearing things the teacher was saying, and I guess I could have just let it go in one ear and out the other, but a teacher would say something like lead with your heart. There was a teacher I knew years ago, and that she's for some reason that really it pierced me. It went right through sort of a hard shell. Like I had always kind of hid my heart. I kind of kept myself like a tough guy. Like I wouldn't let anyone see who I was. I'd wear a mask, and I grew up that way, and it protected me. And in my early sobriety, I was doing yoga, and this teacher would say, "Lead with your heart." It was, I mean, I was almost in tears just hearing that because there was something about what she was saying. It made 100% sense in the moment. I didn't know what to do with it, but I knew it struck a chord. So then it's on me as the student to actually go explore that. Maybe I talk to someone I trust, a sponsor, a mentor, a therapist, a counselor, and I say, I had this experience and it shook me up. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing now. She says, lead with your heart. What does that mean? And then that ends up in this book where I talk about that. For me, it means you speak from your heart, you see from your heart, you listen from your heart. You start to read between the lines. You start to look at life a whole different way when you're using your heart instead of your head. So I would say stay curious, stay open, and when things that you hear sort of ring a bell, I don't think it's an accident. See if you can pull the thread, see if you can chase it down a little bit, and talk with other people who are in a similar situation. There's plenty of people in recovery. I'm sure will be happy to talk to you, and plenty of yogis will be happy to talk about their experience. And um, yeah, it's neat.
I like there's so much that there's takeaways from this conversation. I think a lot of what we talked about is I think early on and how I saw things with yoga being brought into like treatment and how it's talked about with recovery. And I'm hopeful that a conversation like this just continues to highlight things that it's like we put a little spotlight on it, but we haven't really uncovered all the potential that it has. And I think this conversation definitely has shined a brighter light on that. So with that being said, what is any final message, anything you want to let listeners know about what you got going on, or just based on our conversation? Now's your time to share that with them.
I love to share for anyone who's struggling, never give up. It can't be said enough to just hang in there, never give up, just keep trying, especially if times are rough. And it's not specific to people in addiction, just anyone, any one of us. Maybe we've been sober a long time and we're going through a rough patch, either financially, maybe a divorce or a cancer scare or a health issue, whatever it is. Never give up. It's it may it may be the one thing that gets you to where you need to go. I know personally what it is to sort of throw in the towel, to give up. It's a terrible place to be. Despair is one of the most hopeless, terrible places anyone can be. Uh, but I promise if you never give up, there's still a chance, there's still hope, you still have a shot at turning things around or getting to the next level or achieving whatever it is you need to achieve. We've all heard so many stories where so many famous celebrities and athletes they're about to give up and they tried one more time and it was that one last time that tipped the scales. I would say never give up and reach out to anyone else who may have something to offer you that sort of goes with never give up. Ask for help. Reach out to other people. If it's recovery, then find someone who's sober. And if you don't know anybody personally, just start to reach out to anyone. Find me on my website. It's brianhymanyoga.com. There's plenty of people. You can I'm pretty sure anyone you reach out to in recovery has learned that the only way to keep it is to give it away. So we'd be more than happy to help you.
Thanks, Brian. That was a great way to end the conversation. Very hopeful. So for audience members, we're gonna have links to where you can connect more with Brian, find ways to learn more about what he does. But recovery with yoga, supportive practices for transcending addiction. I know I can't stop thinking of off the mat and into the world is going to be a great message. So I want to thank you again, Brian, for the conversation and really appreciate it.
Thanks, Andrew. And thanks for the work that you're doing. You're helping a lot of people, so I appreciate it. And I'm sure a lot of people are getting so much from your work. So thank you for what you're putting out into the world.
You've been listening to Talking Addiction and Recovery with Andrew J. Schreier. We're so glad you've joined us and invite you to connect further with the show and these topics at www.andrewjschreier.com. That's AndrewJSCHREIER.com. You can also email us directly at talkingaddictionandrecovery@gmail.com and connect on social media, Instagram at Talking Addiction and Recovery, Facebook Talking Addiction and Recovery Podcast, and Twitter at TalkAR_podcast. To stay connected and never miss an episode, be sure to like, rate, and subscribe. Until next time, friends, let's keep talking addiction and recovery.